You're listening to The Artist Athlete, episode 104. This podcast is dedicated to Circus. It's a place for professionals in the industry to share their stories, viewpoints, and information, and a place for outsiders to get a sneak peek into this world. Hey friends, fans, and foes, I'm Shannon McKenna. I'm the host of the Artist Athlete podcast and the founder of theartistathlete.com. This episode of the Artist Athlete podcast is sponsored by you. Well, maybe you, if you're on Patreon. And, you know, it's funny, so often I get people who are like, you have a Patreon. What's that all about? And I'm like, I don't really know what you need me to answer. You just go to patreon.com/theartistathlete and pledge a small amount of money that goes to me every month so I can pay all the fees and all the people associated with creating this podcast every week. It's pretty straightforward, I think. So if you're wondering what that Patreon thing is all about, go to patreon.com/theartistathlete. And if you love what you're listening to, sign up to become a Patreon today. My guest today is Susan Voyticky. Susan is a native Brooklynite who traveled far and wide to study at both École Jacques Lecoq in Paris and the Circus Space in London. She has worked for the past 2 decades for a variety of companies, including performing with Keith Hennessy's Circo Zero and the New Pickle Circus in San Francisco, touring the U.S. with Universal Circus, a year in Japan at Universal Studios and the Bindlestiff Family Circus, and Circus Abyssinia in New York. Susan founded Loki Circus Theater to help innovative movement theater productions using a mixture of circus, physical theater, and dance. Susan is also a featured artist at the Uncle Junior Project. So if you want to see a video interview with Susan, as well as some of her amazing feats in the air, all of her work is at www.unclejrproject.com. Here's my interview with Susan Voyticky. Because if I forget to hit the button, then everything sucks.
That could be bad.
Oh, yeah. And the other thing I have to tell you is I'm baking bread. So somewhere through this interview, I'm going to have to be like, can you hold on a minute? And I'm going to run and take the top of the bread thing off of it. And then I'm going to run back. But that's because I'm a professional.
And it's a pandemic. And, you know, like, if you're not baking bread, then what are you doing?
Exactly. You know, like, let's not pretend that this is over. My bread is still going strong.
That's good. I left that to my Amish wife. I was like, you handle the bread.
Excellent. Yes.
And I'll buy the indoor, I'll buy an aerial rig.
Perfect. It's amazing. Okay. Susan Voyticky, we're going to start. And I always start by saying, welcome to the Artist Athlete podcast.
Thank you.
Yeah. Can you tell people who you are and what you do?
I'm Susan Voyticky, an aerialist, a circus artist, and I've been working in the circus arts field for 20 years now, which is a huge surprise to me because honestly, when I started doing circus arts, I was in physical theater school in Paris, and I was really inspired by the circus that I was seeing in France. I remember one of the first thoughts I had was, wow, well, I guess I'm too old for that. And that was when I was like 21. Little did I know that a few years later I would enter a professional circus school undergraduate program in London at what was then called the Circus Space, and I believe now has some fancy name like the National Circus Arts School. I graduated from the circus space with a specialty in swinging lyra, and it was something that very few people at the time did, and it's actually currently still something that very few people do. So it's similar to swinging trapeze, except it's a lyra, and it's bisected by swivels, and it has the range of a swinging trapeze. So you swing up to 180 degrees on it, but instead of just being a bar that you have to catch, it's a circle. So, and it can swivel.
Why do you think it is that not many people do swinging? Like literally, I can count swinging Cerceau. Like I can think of like you, Tanya Burka. I know studied it in school, but like doesn't perform on it, and that's about it.
Yeah, there are a few more people I know,
yeah, sure.
actually, and there's some people that like they're secret people. Like obviously Tanya Burka is one person that unless you really know her, you wouldn't know about that. Actually, Frédérique Debitte, who a lot of people know as Fred Deb, she has an entire training program, mostly for aerial fabric or tissue in France.
She's been on this podcast as well.
Yeah, and actually she was probably one of the first people to do swinging Cerceau.
Okay.
She's the first person I know of. And then there are a handful of people here or there that sort of come in and out.
Do you think it's just like sorry, I'm interrupting you.
No, not at all. It's a really awkward apparatus.
Yeah.
Like it's sort of an apparatus that's almost more defined by its limitations than by the things that it can do. It's sort of like, look at all the things I can't do. There's also the sheer terror now, like of being smacked by the apparatus because it's on a swivel and it swings freely. Like I remember when I first got on it, I was like, okay, so if I'm not careful with this thing, it will knock me out.
Yes.
So, I mean, not that stopped other people before, but somehow when you combine that with the sort of 180 degrees of swinging,
yeah,
swinging itself is sort of like a circus dream. You have to have so much equipment and so many people for this one act. So it's already a hard act to carry around through your professional life, and for me, who like, honestly, when I went to circus school, my dream was not to perform in traditional tented shows. Mm-hmm. And then I picked an apparatus that like could only be performed in the largest of theaters, or very happily in a tented show. Like, it's a little crazy, but I'm definitely known for my singing, swinging Cerceau act because I decided that swinging around on a giant spinning hoop wasn't quite enough. But if you add some voice to that now, now you're talking. Now you've got something.
That's one of my first memories of you, actually. I was at Circus Warehouse in New York City, and it was a long time ago. I think this was like 2011, maybe 2012. And I was in there just like stretching or something. I was at NECA, but I had come to the city to like train for the day or something. And you came in and you just like, you like cracked your neck a couple times, did some shoulder circles, and then just got up on your swinging hoop and just started belting it out. And I was like, damn, who is this woman? It was amazing. Yeah. And they were like, that's Susan. She trained in London. And I was like, oh, it's so theatrical though. It makes total sense. Like, even though you didn't set out, like the apparatus and the act you have on it totally lends itself to like a dramatic theatricality.
Yeah, it was, when I made it at the time, it really combined everything that I was hoping to do in circus, which was to make an act that was both highly technical and highly theatrical, highly emotional, which is why instead of wearing, very sensible tights and spandex, I wear a dress, and like a slightly past my knee, like a long dress. Like, I need to go to the opera, but wait, my swinging cerceau. Okay, well.
There we have it. My bread timer has just gone off, so
Okay,
give
go
me
for it.
literally less than 2 minutes.
No worries.
Oh man, this loaf looks really good.
It's like the pandemic merit badges. You have got your bread baking one. It's like,
yo, if I get merit badges for this, like I'm like a what is it? A cadet? No, like I'm like the gold star. I'm getting like double badges in bread baking. Like I didn't do anything else during the pandemic except for like,
I'm sure
I get a cat too. So
you got the pandemic cat, you got the bread.
I got
baking.
the animal badge. Man,
And then I don't know, like I've been on at least 100 Zoom calls. I feel like I get a badge for that. Right?
For sure. For sure. Also, crying in your shower. I feel like there's a merit badge for that one.
Merit badge for the crying in the shower.
I want to go back to happier times.
Sorry.
And now, no, it's okay. That was just my segue. So I put you. Are you from New York originally?
I am
put you
from
in
New York.
Okay, cool. Because that's like I do this thing where sometimes I know it's inaccurate, especially for circus performers, but kind of the first place I meet someone, that's like where I put them in my mind forever.
That's fair.
And so why did you go to Paris to start your studies? I know you ended up in London to train circus, but New York has so much available. What was it about Paris that drew you there?
Well, New York has so much available, but I actually went to undergraduate at Stanford University, and there's certainly part of the thing where like, why would I go 3,000 miles away from home to get an excellent education? One, California is awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Two, sometimes you just sort of go where the path leads you. And when I was finishing Stanford, I had some friends that were heading to École de Coq, which was a physical theater school in Paris. And I don't know, it's weird. You sort of follow your intuition on some extent. And you're like, it just seemed like the right thing to do at the time. Right. And that's.
I have many a bad night that started out with, it seemed like the right thing
to do at the time. Well, I'm not going to say it was easy or it was even necessarily logical. I moved to France. I didn't even speak French. Like I went to a theater school. And it was a physical theater school, but it's a problem when you don't understand what the instructor is saying to you, literally.
Ouais, c'est ça.
So, thank goodness I wasn't in circus school at first, because that could have been real dangerous.
Did you study performance at Stanford?
I did. I studied like theater and dance. So it wasn't sort of out of the blue. I didn't, wake up. I had majored in science, technology, and society with a focus in genetics. And I was
that's not studying dance and performance.
It's true. It's not. But essentially, if I had had a minor, I would have sort of had a dance theater minor.
Okay.
I studied improv with Keith Johnson, Patricia Ryan. I studied making one-person shows with Anna Devere Smith.
Wow.
I was dancing contact improv and modern dance. Like essentially every moment I wasn't fulfilling my degree, I was working on being very theatrical and very much in my body theatrical. So not a very heady theatrical.
Mm-hmm.
So I was working on the Human Genome Project at Stanford, and I was still doing like plays with people in the drama department at Stanford. And that's how I got into contact with these friends who were like, let's go study the most physical theater at École Coq. And I have to admit, I'd never heard of École Coq at the time, but something in me just said, you know what? It just makes sense that now I moved to Paris and study physical theater. It just makes sense on a visceral level. It doesn't make any sense logically nonsensical, but definitely in my heart I was like, yeah.
Well, this is what I find so interesting about your story. And also I have like a non-question, which is, what is it about people who study swinging cerceau and are also incredibly intelligent? Because, like, again,
I don't know.
Bergen's like MIT grad, and then, you know, like Fred is brilliant. And then, like, what is it about you guys that you're just like super smart and then choose this like really illogical
apparatus? I don't know. For me, like when I decided to go to circus school, and they were sort of like, what do you think you could major in? You know, it's like, here are all the things that you have interest in. And I was like, well, what can I study here that, you know, I need to study here. Like I wouldn't be able to put the time in anywhere else. And that came back swinging. And now, have you ever done swinging trapeze?
No. I've done flying trapeze and I've been around a lot of swinging trapeze, but I've never done it. Wait, yes, I have done it once.
Okay.
And I did one lesson one time.
Did you get past the fear of the lesson?
Oh yeah, no, I'm not afraid of heights.
That's great.
So I had a lot of fun, but I also knew it was one of those things where I was like, I can only do this once because I really like it, but I don't want to go down this path. I have that sometimes. Do you ever, you know what I'm talking about? Where it's like, oh, I could get really obsessed with this. And then you're like, what? But I've already got 6 things that I'm really obsessed with. So this can't come to the party.
Yeah.
That's how I felt about swinging trapeze.
No, I definitely get it. And swinging is, it's magical, right?
It really is.
Swinging, like, it doesn't matter how strong you are. It doesn't matter. There's so many things that are so much a factor in other things in circus. Like, oh, you have to be brilliantly bendy. You have to be incredibly strong. Swinging takes, you know, it can take all of that, but it could also take absolutely none of that. You have to be fully present for swinging. It's completely zen. Like the moment that you have to do a trick, everything is easy. Like if you get your timing right, there's nothing difficult there. It's literally something anyone can do, right? There's that joy. I mean, and of course you need to be trained, and of course there are like your typical like little pains that the more you're trained, the less you pay attention to. But I don't know, it's something that takes me like back to being a kid on a swing where you can just about touch the sky. And in that moment, everything is possible.
That's really beautiful. And yeah. And it has that effect over the audience too. Like spoiler alert, when I was interviewing Victor and I asked him about the kind of like, and I asked him actually in a very general sense, like, what do you see as the future of circus? Because like, hello, global pandemic, like none of us have any work. Like, what are we going to do? Like, and he was he was like, well, and he answered it in kind of the context of swinging trapeze, where he was like, swinging trapeze will always be in like, it'll always be there because it's amazing. That was kind of what he said. He was just like, it's the dopest. People always want to watch it. It will always be around.
Yeah. There's a sense of freedom that you get both from watching swinging and from doing swinging that is, it's enormous. You know? It's that feeling of like the whole world opens up to you.
Yeah. I want to ask you, This is something when I was watching your video on the Uncle Junior project, which if y'all who are listening don't know about it, you need to. UncleJuniorProject.com. It's Veronica Blair's amazing project that she's doing, chronicling the history of African American and Black circus artists. And Susan is one of them. And you talked about a medical career and being helpful and helping and like this desire to help people or save people in this way, and how circus kind of conflicted with that. And your parents were not so happy about you going into the profession because they didn't see how circus can help people. How do you think circus helps people?
Yeah, I think it is harder to see like how circus in particular, but the real question is, how does art in general help people, and how does it help them know themselves? You know, the main reason I was interested in becoming a doctor is because my older brother, Edward, has Down syndrome. And he, I was always told, well, he has an extra 21st chromosome, and to a child, that doesn't mean anything. And it takes a while for you to study enough things to understand, oh, okay, so, this is a medical problem. And, that's what I hoped in going into genetics. There are so many genetic and medical problems, and there's lots of ways to develop medical routines to either alleviate that or make things better. But the thing is that circus and theater and knowing yourself, it teaches you sort of how to be a better person. And maybe it's not helpful in the sort of logical, practical way of, oh, I made this medicine and now these people don't have to suffer in this way. But creating art to inspire and to help people live better lives, to have an aspiration, I think it's helpful. It's helpful in perhaps a non-obvious, non-practical way, but life would be pretty
it's
sad.
Not quantitative.
It's certainly not quantitative. I can't say how many people's lives have I saved as a circus artist, other than, diving underneath my students as after I've put them in danger, but yeah. I think the hope and the joy and the desire to live that circus brings to the world, I think it definitely is helpful in a truly qualitative way.
For sure. Do you have any ways, like directly or indirectly, that your studies in genetics have influenced your circus practices?
Like almost none that I can think of.
I'm always so interested in this because my maybe it's a great lie that I tell myself to not feel guilty about all the bullshit that I do all day. But I like to say that nothing is wasted. Like nothing you learn, nothing you experience, none of that is, it's not a throwaway, like everything will always inform everything else. And so I'm always so curious when people have like a drastically different career and then go to circus, like if there's any crossover or carryover. But maybe you're just proving me wrong.
No, I don't think the education I got and the things I learned and the amount of studying I did goes to waste. I mean, while I was at Stanford, I was introduced to philosophers that I would have never heard of, and they're definitely inspirational in terms of shows and different ways of looking at things. Right? So can I draw a direct line from genetics to circus? Absolutely not. But I can definitely say that I don't regret any of the things that I've learned.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes the connections aren't so obvious, I guess.
Yeah. Like I'm wondering like what philosophers or what were those moments?
Learning about like Foucault and Nietzsche, there's like several books of poetry that I have that I still find inspiration in.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I think about shows that I could make based on different philosophies around that.
That's so cool. Yeah, I think that cross inspiration is something that a college degree kind of gives, no matter what it's in, like mine is in theater. I went to NYU for drama. So like, but even like having that exposure to just different things has opened my mind as a circus artist so much.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah.
No, I think it's true. I mean, I have a friend who he runs a gallery, and I just love looking at the visual art. And you can see shows based on visual art. They have such a strong standpoint.
Yeah,
I think there's so much great cross fertilization. Circus is amazing in its own right, and when you add things, you get a lot of fun and different things happening.
Yeah. So I always have to ask this to Americans, especially those who go abroad, because I was one, but I didn't come back because there's so much great funding. And I feel like the way, especially French people, but in England too, just like the way that they look at art versus the way it's treated in America is so different. Maybe not New York, but so what brought you back to the States?
That is a good question. I think definitely a little bit of hubris,
Okay.
like, I'm going to go and I'm going to change the world, and I'm going to start with my home country.
Yes.
And then you're like, well, I was wrong. No, not necessarily, but you definitely have an energy when you're younger that you don't have, and I think there was a point, because I had spent 3 years or like 2.5 years in France, and I was just finishing circus school in London. So I'd spent 2.5 years there, and my brain was sort of like, well, I guess like I should, obviously I should get a job. And there was sort of the possibility of getting a job still in Europe. And there was the possibility of one in San Francisco with Keith Hennessy, and as he was founding Circo Zero. And I was just like, I thought, if I stay in Europe now, I don't think I'll ever leave. And, as much as sometimes I go, why did you leave? I don't regret the choice to go to San Francisco and try to bring the circus that inspired me back to my home country. Yeah, I don't regret that choice. And and in turn, it also changed me. You have to appreciate you're just on a different journey over in the States than you are in other places where there's more appreciation and there's more interest in all art forms in general, and in circus specifically. But even so, there's a little bit of the excitement of the Wild West out here.
Yeah, it's true.
And you're bringing circus, like my type of circus, to people who've never even thought or seen or heard of it, And so, like, that's great.
What is your type of circus?
It's, the type of circus I most enjoy putting forth is a deeply theatrical circus. And definitely having moved back to the States and having worked in tented shows and shows that are a little possibly more traditional than people, I've gained a huge appreciation for traditional circus and skills and the joy that they bring people. Yeah. The truth is, before I moved to France and saw the shows I saw, I would have never really thought about doing aerial training or joining the circus, because even though it was wonderful and amazing, it felt very otherworldly to me. And the thing that moved me so much in the shows that I saw in France, and one of them was le cri de la communion, and Kahen Kaha, how deeply human they were. And that's sort of what I mean by, so it's not that, trad shows or cabarets don't have they don't have a place. The real problem is sometimes you don't see your place inside of them.
Oh, that's such a good distinction. That's I love that. They have a place, you just don't see your place inside of them.
Yeah, and so the type of circus that I always wanted to create, it never was very far from the very humanness of the people performing it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because I don't know, in a weird way, I feel like and you do get jaded to it in circus, like, oh man, there's that, and you see this at like these giant shows in arenas. You're like, oh, 10 people are on their hands, and, it's like, but, the kids are like buying lights and throwing popcorn at one another. Like, you know what I mean? You're just like
these 10 Ukrainians started at 3 years old and are hopping back and forth from one arm to the other in these sparkly costumes while Kesha plays. Yes, I know exactly what
and you're just like, what?
Yeah. Where is the appreciation for the art?
Yeah, it like boggles the mind.
Yeah, truly.
But at the same time, there's, that's part of it too.
Absolutely.
But it doesn't generally, as an artist, make me super excited.
Oh shit. Okay, hold on. Last bread time, and then I'm back forever. Man, this is the worst kind of multitasking. Okay. I'm so sorry.
Okay.
Art. Yes, back to art. Yeah, no, I totally get what you mean. I think what's so tricky about creating circus in the US is that idea of like the cotton candy, popcorn, laser light show, arena, like I've done those shows and they're super fun.
Yeah, and there's absolutely,
that's like the idea that we have in America, or that Americans have about circus.
Yeah, that's like the only way it can be. And
yeah. So how did you, what do you do to make it different? And I'm asking like you personally, not like what does one in the general world.
I understand.
Yeah.
What did I started off out of circus school in a small company, with Keith Hennessy at the lead, making Circo Zero, bringing this type of, literally his tagline is intimate, spectacular circus. Right. And I think that's one of the things that you don't get in America is these intimate spectacles, right? We have a tendency to supersize everything.
Yeah, we're not big on the intimacy.
So I joined up with Keith Hennessy, and then I worked a lot in San Francisco. I worked with the New Pickles when they were directed by Gypsy and Shayna of Seven Fingers fame, and tried to continue to make the work that I thought would speak to people. And I've made several acts since I realized, working in swinging wasn't always going to be the way. I made a few static lyra acts, a hand-to-hand act, a sear wheel act, as I kept sort of, searching for ways to keep making the type of circus that I find appealing. And, along the way, I also became a teacher and tried to help other people develop a sensibility about the work, and that's whether they wanted to say, hey, like my goal is to join Cirque du Soleil, or they're like, no, I want to express myself and this is the medium I've chosen. Then you learn to be open to, giving people what they need so that they can follow a path that feels true to them.
Yeah, I'd love for you to expand on that a little bit. Like, what does it mean to give someone a sensibility about the work?
For me to give someone a sensibility about the work, certainly, of course, with Circus, it first and foremost means that, one, they're safe. Two, that they let their heart inform their art, right? So they don't have to do what everyone else is doing, that they can make an act that is true to who they are as a person, in terms of music choices, in terms of the way they move. It's a very delicate thing, raising an artist, because you have to both be able to edit and mold and say, no, that's not it. And you have to encourage and say, I want you to go further into this.
It's such a good point. Yeah. And how do you know when to do what?
Sometimes it's intuition.
Sure. And I'm sure it's different based on each artist, you know?
It's absolutely different based on each artist. And it's also, just like some students need to be pushed to the edge, right? Because they're letting their fear hold them back from their own potential, and sometimes other artists need to be pulled back from the edge because they've gone into a place that, at least from your perception, is dangerous for them, whether it's physically or emotionally. And that's the thing. It's trying to figure out that edge of resilience.
Oh man, I love that term, that edge of resilience.
Well, we work with that a lot in the circus, right?
Oh, totally. The edge of resilience. And how do you help people find that edge? Is it physical? Is it through talking to them?
It's definitely, there's a lot of talk that has to go on. There's a lot of observation, right?
Okay.
Because sometimes as the outside eye, you can see things that they don't necessarily see, right? So you can suggest things, places that they might not go, or they might not even know they could go, right? That's the thing about having students, is that, they might not even be aware of what you're asking them to do. How do you guide them to those places? Like, especially, what I found, as the level of student, as you're moving past sort of your very beginners, and you're no longer sort of concerned with like their basic safety, their basic fitness. And as you have artists that move into places that you've never been, and perhaps you're not interested in going because it's not a place for you, right? How do you continue to guide someone when they're definitely sort of past where you're going with that particular piece of equipment or idea, right?
Yeah. How do you do that?
I don't know.
I'm like, I'm like,
what is it?
What do you do? Because this is what I see, and I have seen, or I guess the openness and vulnerability required to be not even an instructor, a guide in that way, where if it's not something that's your cup of tea in whatever way, or it's not something you've ever physically done before, like, how do you not let your own kind of sensibilities erode your relationship in fostering an artist's vision?
Well, I think to be a good mentor, because that's essentially what we're talking about, is mentoring someone, is being open to the idea that a vision needs support, right? And without that support, the vision can suffer. So you have to find a way to essentially be the best support you can. And sometimes that means, that might mean consulting with other colleagues, like, hey, especially you're dealing with so many different body types and so many different ways of doing things sometimes.
Sure.
And it's really different for every individual thing. But I actually I love it because everyone's so different and every problem's so different. So generally, if you keep, searching for an answer, you hopefully find an answer, or you come to a place where you say, hey, we're going to have to explore this together. I actually don't know what the best thing is. Like sometimes you have to come to terms with your actual limitations, because like the last thing you want to do is, pretend to help someone.
Oh my God. Yeah. And it comes back, I guess, to that, like, or not comes back, but like humility is the word that pops into my mind. Is that, yeah.
You have to realize your own limitations.
For sure. For sure. So tell me, what do you have coming up in this strange time where we're not performing necessarily and we're not really able to teach as much? What are you working on? What are you doing?
I've been working for a few years. My friend Michelle Arvin, who also ran the Circus Warehouse, where we both taught and trained, and the Circus Warehouse was, of course, Susie Winson's baby.
Yes.
But for a few years, Michelle Arvin and I have had a very small circus theater company called Low Key Circus Theater. And actually, during the pandemic, we got a small grant from the Bindlestiff 1st of May. And we're working on and the grant was to work on a production that we had entitled Colored Girls, which essentially was inspired by the poem For Colored Girls.
For colored girls who've considered suicide when the rainbow is not enough.
Exactly.
That one? I love that piece.
Yeah, it's a beautiful piece. And I've seen the piece and I've read the piece. And I would love to make a circus show where there are...
Yes! Oh my God. Is that what you're doing?
That's sort of what I'm working on.
Yes! I'm so sorry. I just got real excited about this. Okay.
Yeah. That's good. That's good.
That's awesome.
But of course, the show itself had to, and it wasn't even, the grant wasn't even for the whole show. It was for a workshopping of it. But all of that has sort of been put on hold essentially until the pandemic can end. But I've been, working with a small cast doing Zoom meetings, and we're sort of setting a scene for what can go forward after the pandemic, and and even a little bit for what's going to happen as we work inside of the pandemic, thinking about different small films and videos we can make for this. Sure. One of the great things that came out is Veronica also received a small grant for working on a film, and she has made her film, and it's called The Crown, and it's going to come out in the middle of February. So that's, and I'm excited to be in it and to have the other women of color in it. So
I am so excited to see it. She's been like alluding to it and like teasing me about it. Being like, I'm working on this thing. I don't know. Veronica, she's so like she's so low key about stuff. She's like, oh, I'm doing this little thing. And then you watch it and you're like, that was the coolest thing I've ever seen in my life. Like, what do you mean a little thing? Like, that's a full length production.
Veronica's pretty self-effacing, but she's awesome, as we all know.
Yes, for sure.
So that's, and then of course, trying to figure out going forward as a circus artist physically, it's, 20 years is a long time. I don't know that I have many more acts left in me for performing, but I do want to stay in this world, and I'd love to make more opportunities for the circus artists I see coming up to make theatrical shows, the shows that I really find inspirational.
For sure.
So, and this is my sort of, with Low Key and Colored Girls, this is sort of my first major foray into that space, which is terrifying.
Oh my God, it's going to be so good. Will you keep us posted about it, and I'll keep my listeners posted about it so we can follow your journey?
Absolutely.
Awesome. So we're coming to the end of our chat together. Thank you so much for coming on. I do have one final question for you.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, what advice would you give to yourself at the beginning of your career? You can define your career however you want to. Because I know that sometimes the beginnings of circus careers are kind of these weird amorphic things that there's never one moment that it begins, you know?
Yeah, it's right at the beginning of that first contract you got.
Yeah, right. Or that first pull up, you know, who knows?
The first pull up that says, you can do this. Actually, some of the best advice of my career was given to me in the middle of my career, and that was by the infamous Elena Panova, which is that you have to work as hard on the business side that you do on the training side.
Mm-hmm.
And this is, of course, the thing that nobody wants to hear. Because, of course, you don't get involved in circus because you love paperwork and,
right,
you know, or I mean, and maybe nowadays it's easier with Instagram, but it seems like it's still a lot of computer work.
Yeah.
But, you know, whatever.
Well, and I always joke that, like, compared to the business side, like, the training side is easy.
Yeah.
It's really direct. It's really obvious. Like, you go in, you do your skills, you do the drills, you stretch, you know, like there's like, it's very obvious what you need to do. And sometimes in the business side, it's not so obvious.
Yeah. You know, how much do you need to network? How much is too much networking?
Yeah. What do people want to see? Who's who? Where do you go?
Yeah.
Yeah. All of that.
But
yeah,
I think that's some of the best advice you can have is you have to work as hard on the business side as you do on the training side. And it's definitely harder to fail with this as a career if you do that.
Awesome.
But I guess the other piece of advice that I would have is like, don't be afraid to network and go new places to meet people.
Mm-hmm.
Which, you know, I feel like I did for the most part, but you always think, why didn't I go there then? And you're like, I don't know.
No, that's such good advice because I feel like sometimes I felt like at the very beginning that I was like, my video is enough. If I just email my video out, people will see me. And it's like, no. They want to see you. Yeah. They want to talk to you. They want to make sure you're a person who can say words and not be
there's kind of insane. Nothing that really substitutes for that, like in-person connect. Like once we can in-person connect again, you have to do it.
For sure. Well, Susan, thank you so much for coming on today.
Of course.
I so appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you.
That was my interview with the fabulous Susan Voyticky. I want to bring up something that Susan talked about in her interview, and it's especially relevant to me today. For some reason today, I've had a lot of people in my DMs on Instagram writing me because they have opportunities that have come up, or they've had opportunities that they've lost. They didn't get into ENC, they got waitlisted, or they have a really cool job, but they're not sure if they should go to the audition. And when I think back on Susan's interview and listening to the playback of it, it hits me so hard when I asked her about how she wound up in Europe. I asked her more specifically, like she was in New York City, kind of the center of performing arts and theater, and why would she go to Europe? And she was out on the West Coast studying. And then she decided she the funny thing is she doesn't have a rational answer. She was just like, it was what made sense at the time. And I think in an artist's life, it's so important to remember that you don't have to have a rational answer all the time. I mean, obviously, we live in a society where we all have to contribute. And unfortunately, we have to like make money in exchange for goods and services. However, the ways in which we can contribute and the ways in which we can make our livelihoods in this world are often really surprising and unexpected. And some of the most fruitful and rewarding ways come from when we lead from the heart, from things that just, in Susan's words, just make sense. If you want to learn more about Susan Voyticky, she is on Instagram. It's @Voyticky. And her website is voyticky.com. And as for me, for aerial training tips and inspiration, you can follow me on Instagram. I'm at @the_artist_athlete. My website is theartistathlete.com. I'm also on Facebook, and I'm on TikTok, The Artist Athlete. And if you love what you're listening to every single week, if you're like, wow, I never thought about Circus that way, or, oh my gosh, maybe I can do this too, or, gee whiz, Shannon sure works hard and talks a lot, and I like it. Go to patreon.com/theartistathlete and sign up to become a Patreon. That's it for me. I'll talk at you next week, friends, fans, and foes. The Artist Athlete podcast is supported solely by donations from people like you. Here's what some of those people have to say.
Hi, my name is Noah and I do hand balancing. Hi, my name is Woody and I do lyra. Thank you for listening to the Artist Athlete podcast.
Hi, I'm Freya. You can hear my whole story in episode 50 of the Artist Athlete podcast, but I'm here to tell you about something else that I do. I'm a qualified health and nutrition coach. I help people with sleep and body confidence, among other things. You can see everything I have to offer at wildguidance.com or follow me on Instagram at wildguidance.
Hi everyone, I'm Dominique, a ground acrobat, trapeze artist, and coach, currently bringing Circus to the extremely cold but very beautiful Northern Ontario, Canada. Circus has changed my life and I'm so grateful to everyone in this community. Find me on Instagram at DomUpsideDown or my website domupsidedown.com.
Aloha! My name is Beth Russell, and I live on the beautiful island of Maui, Hawaii. I am an aerial artist and movement instructor specializing in chakra yoga to keep me balanced and grounded. I play with silks, trapeze, lyra, rope, acro, aerial yoga and dance, slacklining, pole, bungee, and climbing. Really anything that goes up and allows me to explore 3D space. You can find my dedicated aerial page on Instagram at Maui Aerialist. If you find yourself coming to Maui, let's play.
Hey there, friends, fans, and enemies. This is Chris Alston, Patreon of the Artist Athlete podcast, straps artist and lyra performer and acrobat out of Greenville, South Carolina. So if you're ever passing through, make sure to stop in and see me and my friends. We have a wonderful space and we'd love to see you.
Hi, my name is Erica Lee. I'm from St. Louis, Missouri, and I'm an aerialist. I teach performing arts to elementary school during the day and do pole and sling and rope by night. I really, really like the Artist Athlete podcast because it gives me a lot of circus goals to look forward to. It gives me a lot of insight on what's going on around the world in circus, and that's why I'm Patreon.
Hello, all. Thank you for tuning in to the Artist Athlete podcast. I am Opal Schwartz from Minneapolis, Minnesota. If you're ever in the cities, feel free to stop by the Aviary Minneapolis. It's a great time. With that, I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your week, and goodbye.
Hey there, artists and athletes. This is Andy Smith, owner and artistic director at Saltaire Circus School in Jacksonville Beach, Florida. And I want to thank you for contributing to the Artist Athlete podcast. If you ever find yourself down in Florida, come check us out. Whether you're an artist, athlete, or someone ordinary just looking to be extraordinary, we have a place for you.